The great wooden door creaked, howling through the abyssal layers of the castle. The interruption of the nightly stillness startled Illith, her hair standing on end as she scrambled from the hungry doorway.
Crap.
She thought.
There's no way someone didn't hear that.
She stood still, her body pressed against the heavy oak doorway. Her breathing slowed and dimmed as she waited, listening for any presence of someone around. Usually, there were guards that patrolled this whole corridor. She was certain she had managed to slip in between shifts. But what if she had alerted someone? It always seemed like nothing got past their eagle-eyed gaze. The girl took a deep breath in, listening for any footsteps, any indication of detection. Her heartbeat pulsed in her ears as she listened closely. Drip, drip, drip. No sound of footsteps, no curious creatures, only the sound of the water seeping through the dungeon. The coast was clear. Illith breathed a heavy sigh, her heartbeat returning to a normal rhythm. She dusted off her nightgown, and with a deep breath, took a step into the gloomy dungeon. Illith creeped down the winding stairway, step by step. The barely lit dungeon reeked of seawater and old fish, like the wharves on the outskirts of town. Wet light dripped in through the cracks in the brickwork, revealed a damp, sticky slime that coated the walls of the stairs. Green in hue and rancid in smell. Disgusting. It had to be down here. She pressed further as the air itself became heavy. Moisture swirled with stale air, coalescing into a sweltering mire of humid discomfort. Illith trudged through the swampy stairwell, step after step, plunging ever further into its depths, her torch guiding her along. She continued downwards, her mind lapsing from the task as the humidity and heat began to wear on her body. The memories of past warnings echoed in her head, but she persisted, following down the winding staircase. Any thought that remained was interrupted by an abrupt splash. Illith shocked herself out of her daze, looking around to re-examine her surroundings. Solid ground, mostly. The stony floor was covered in a mire of water and algae. Illith felt the water rise above her ankles. Her boots kept out of the water, though barely for now. The stairway itself had funneled into a towering basement room, the ceiling lost to the darkness above. Posted along the walls of the arched entrance were two orange torches, flickering softly against the water. The dim light barely crawled over the basement swamp, failing to reach the edge at all. Illith inhaled deeply, preparing to wade into the muck. Each footfall left an echoing splash that pierced the still room. Nothing had been down here in ages. Certainly no sun had touched this deep into the castle dungeon, yet the green hue of an algal bloom raged on beneath the water. It was disgusting, certainly, but well beneath notice now. The pool deepened, coming up to Illith's knee. Her boots were little help now, as she could feel her feet sloshing around in her soaked socks. The skirt of her nightgown was soaked in dungeon water. The trek wound on, Illith's torch reaching into the chamber for any purchase, but finding only blackness as she moved forward. No clear roof, and no clear wall. Still, she continued. The black nothing amidst this blooming sea seemed to extend far beyond what could be imagined. Each cautious step bounced from the distant walls as Illith marched onward. In the distance, a flash caught Illith's eye. Dim metal bars thrust skyward, well into the blackness. Rust had overtaken them, forming stiff, jagged columns of faded orange. The room had an end after all. This was a holding chamber for something, but there was clearly no way in. Whatever was here, it wasn't meant to be let out. The girl proceeded forward, inching closer to the submerged bars. The overwhelming smell of seawater and fish guts that had permeated the tunnels was now powering down on her, nearly suffocating her. She held back a gag, scanning her torch across the bars. Amidst the darkness, there was a rubbery twitch, something slick and wet lying just behind the bars. It was difficult to make out, even from this distance. It was as though the dark itself was pulsing. Illith swallowed. This was it. The mythical prisoner of Castle Id.
Hello?
She stuttered. Her nerves rose up in her throat, interjecting to silence her. The mass began to stir, a splash of alertness rippling across the limber creature, animating its peculiar body. It opened a wide, piscine eye, a piercing yellow that seemed to cut through the darkness itself. It dwarfed Illith, towering above her form. The being's voice was a low rumble that shook the stony lagoon around them. Another eye opened, and another, all glaring down on the young lady. As a myriad of yellow eyes opened across the dark, fleshy wall, a musty, noxious breeze crept through the room. The stench of sea waste. The presence of this awful creature loomed over Illith. Her mind raced as the enormity of the castle's great secret finally pressed upon her. This was beyond anything she could have imagined when she set out that evening on her mission. But she was determined. There was no turning back now. She stood firm, trembling. She spoke calmly and deliberately.
Davy Jones, Devil of the Sea's Wrath, I wish to strike a deal. Please help me.
The monster winced. It writhed.
What is the king is doing now? Military disruption, more rain for this desolate rock. You must have a good offer for me this time too, sending a child like you.
Several tendrils began to wrap around the bars of the cage, scaled yet smooth like boneless eels. Every move the demon made was a new, small terror hidden in darkness.
No, sir. I'm not here on behalf of the king. I wanted to strike a deal.
Illith stiffened her back, holding on to any breath she could find.
That's to say, me.
The creature's tentacles relax.
You, little one.
A howl of laughter erupts from the cage. Illith grimaced.
It's not a joke. I'm serious.
The mass stills. She gathered herself once more.
I want to be free of the castle.
The serious and deliberate tone that Illith had tried to perform cracked once more.
I'm so tired of this place. Of all of them. I can't do it anymore. Please help me.
Davy Jones blinked, its alien gaze unmoved.
Let's see. If that is all, then please.
It unfurled one of its tentacles, slinking it past the rusted bars of its holding cell.
Take hold, girl. I will free you.
Illith hesitated. She expected more pushback than this, but could she truly ignore such a gift? This was the only chance she had to leave the rock and flee. She reached out, grabbing the slimy appendage tight. It squirmed under her grip before eventually relenting. Illith closed her eyes and prepared to receive her salvation. In a flash, the tentacle shot up her arm, wrapping around it tightly. The sudden sensation threw Illith off balance as she tried to squirm away, but she couldn't.
What's going on?
She screamed. A cackle echoed through the dungeon. starting as a murmur before crescendoing to fill the air. Amidst the mass of flesh, a shark-toothed smile peeked out of the mire.
Did you think this was gonna come with a price? If you were to leave, you were taking me with you.
Illith continued to try to scrape the demon away, but it was no use. The tentacle began to melt into her arm, fusing with her flesh as Davy Jones's form began to unravel. Her mind pulsed as a surge of memories flooded into her. Squalls she had never witnessed, sunken ships she had only seen in legends, and the skeletons that plagued their depths. With each vision, her sight grew dim. Illith dropped to her knees, feebly trying to pull her arm from the devil's grasp. But it was no use. She passed out in the mire of the dungeon. The crooked smile of Davy Jones seared into her mind. A cold sweat enveloped the captain. She had been tossing and turning all night, the same memories whirling about her head like a tempest. Once more the darkness caught up with her, and with a thrust, she burst back into the waking world, her breathing heavy. She looked around, analyzing her surroundings. A beige canvas was strung up by several wooden sticks on a sandy shore, shielding her just enough from the crisp autumn breeze. The smell of a campfire somewhere in the distance wafted through the air, dancing with the sea breeze. Gribble, her loyal deckhand, watched over his captain with concern, a sad mule peeking behind his lips. He'd seen her have nightmares before, but the worry was there all the same. Illith relaxed. She was safe here, away from the dungeon. She looked over to Gribble and gave him a friendly pet.
At ease, sailor. I'm fine.
She said with a lazy smile. The stout creature nodded, though a hint of concern still lurked behind his eyes. With a waddle and a jump, he left the lean-to and returned to attending the fire once more. Illith prepared for the day by first brushing her unruly orange hair, careful not to irritate her tentacles. Every brush was a reminder. The memory was distant, but it wasn't just a dream. That night left her changed. She donned her uniform and clasped up her coat. The nip in the air would only get worse once they were out at sea after all. She emerged from the lean-to, dusting herself off from the night's rest, as she made her way over to the campfire. Gribble was tending to yesterday's catch, weedy cod salted and cooked on a skewer. As the captain arrived, Gribble scooped up one of the fish and presented it to her. Illith took it in hand and took a hearty bite from it. Buttery, flaky, and perfectly salted. Gribble had really outdone himself. The deckhand inhaled his own fish soon after, sating himself with a tasty reward. The delicious taste of breakfast lingered on Illith's tongue. Fish was always a wonderful treat, but it was a fleeting comfort with the memories that tormented her. The nightmare was over, but the marks remained. Davy Jones's contract was sealed into her flesh, a throbbing reminder that despite her momentary reprieve, there was little time to rest. It was always there waiting for her. The crew had a lot of work ahead of them, and very few hours in the day. The tailwind doesn't pilot itself. Illith wiped her lips and stretched.
Alright, Gribble. Let's head out. We've got a long day ahead of us.